Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Torvis Podcast. My name is Ari, and I'm joined by Jason here today. And we have two special guests with us. We have Janee Cox and Ashley Daley, and they are two individuals who deal with the police, train the police. Ashley's a police officer and a trainer. Janee is a trainer down in Texas. And welcome, ladies. We appreciate you being on.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
So I want to actually just start kind of with your background so the listening audience knows where you're coming from and what your background is in either in policing and or jiu-jitsu and or both. So Ashley, why don't we start with you?
All right, so I've been an officer 6 years. I started at a department on the east side of Houston, and about 2 years ago, I moved to a department in Central Texas. I've been there 2 years, like I said. I'm in the training division now. I train defensive tactics, mainly like Gracie combative style, ground fighting. I'm a jiu-jitsu blue belt. Have been training for about 3.5 years, which kind of played into why they got me in obviously the defensive tactics part of training. But yeah.
Okay. Janee.
So my background is mostly in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's a stronger, more veteran background. I've been training for about 13 years. I'm a brown belt. I train at Dark Clan Fight Lab here in Austin. On the law enforcement side, when I moved to Texas, I became a training specialist in Texas Department of Public Safety. And I've started in fully admin role and then recently became a full-time training specialist for our arrest and control tactics unit.
Awesome. And so also you were on the first all-female On It invitational, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I was invited to do the 155 class. It didn't turn out my way, but you know, that's how competition goes sometimes.
Yeah. What was that experience like with all the ladies just for that one?
It was super cool. You know, I think with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, especially, females really bond well. So by the rules meeting, we had already all taught everyone in our bracket, and we were talking like, hey, it doesn't matter who wins, let's go out for tacos after, and everything like that. So
awesome. Okay, so we just kind of want to get into it because it's as you know, females in jiu-jitsu is it's pretty rare. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a male-dominated art and sport, as you know. So being involved in policing as well is even more rare, combining those two. So that's why Jason and I wanted to have you on, because we wanted to chat to you about it. So why don't we get into it? And Jason, you want to kind of start with chatting with them about jiu-jitsu and policing?
Well, I think it's interesting that both you guys are defensive tactics instructors, and you know, I'm a defensive tactics instructor, and you know, I'm fortunate that my department kind of gives me carte blanche to teach, to develop my own curriculum and to teach guys the things that I think are the most important. Just out of curiosity, what are like the main things? What's the core techniques or philosophy that you're teaching guys when you're implementing jiu-jitsu into defensive tactics? And we'll go with Janee first.
okay, so for us, what we do is we emphasize the fact that although being on the ground for a law enforcement situation is not ideal, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, because it's energy efficient, it's leverage, it works on all different body types. People can find the techniques that work best for them in those situations. And that's really what we keep on reminding them. Like, okay, we're not necessarily looking to go to the ground, but if we do, we want it to be on our own terms.
Okay. Ashley.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Obviously, most fights do end up on the ground. We're not trained boxers and we're not fighting trained boxers, so we're likely going to get in a tussle and it's going to end up on the ground. So our main training philosophy about getting on the ground is how to conserve the most energy until our backup can get there, and just keeping ourselves safe, you know, safe falling, safe positions where we can hold and maintain for a long time. My department, we're allowed to use the VNR as less lethal force. So we train that a lot and we have really great success with that. So that's one thing that we really on is the VNR.
Okay.
Could you explain what the VNR is for people that may not know?
Yeah, so it's a vascular neck restraint. Some people call it a rear naked choke. We don't, because it's not a choke. A choke is of the airway. The VNR, vascular neck restraint, is the restraint of the arteries. So that's kind of why we call it a VNR. And a lot of departments use it as lethal force. We're grateful we don't we're allowed to use it, just like a baton, a taser, pepper spray, even open hands. So.
Awesome. And so one of the things I like to ask people who come on the show is, what were your reasons for starting jiu-jitsu? Because we all have different reasons, and our reasons actually change as we go through it. So Janee, what were your reasons that you started? Who got you involved, and what was the thing?
So I got involved by accident, actually. I was working as a nanny in Brooklyn, and when I picked up my charge one day, he was like, "Yeah, I'm doing karate." He was 6, so you obviously have to verify what exactly is going on there. So I talked to his mom, and it turned out she had enrolled him in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Started taking him to class. 2 weeks later, I tried my own class, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I can see where it's effective. I was living in Brooklyn. I mean, self-defense definitely has its place there. And so that's why I started and continued to train. 6 months later, I was asked to join their staff, and I started seeing it from the professional side, running a business, really how it impacts everybody's lives, how it impacted my own. You know, it gave me an outlet for my anxiety, anger, all that fun stuff, got me in really good shape. And then later on, when I became a more senior belt, I started competing and seeing that just that was fun. You know, I just testing myself on that.
And what were your reasons for staying in? I mean, they've obviously changed. Like, why do you stay in now?
Now it's one of those things. It's like the community's so fun. The defensive, you know, part of it is great. And now it's actually part of my job. Like, you know.
Right. Cool. Ashley, how about you? Reasons
Yeah,
for starting?
I got in it accidentally. I was doing bodybuilding, and my nutritionist does jujitsu, and she's like, just come to a class with me, just come to a class. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I went, and I was like, man, this is great. I'm super naturally aggressive, and I was like, this is a great outlet. You know, I always like to do things that challenge me. And so I started going, and I was already an officer at this point, but I started going, and it slowly evolved into where I saw how it could be beneficial for work. So I didn't originally start going because I was an officer. After I got into it, that's when I kind of was like, oh man, this is great stuff. And it built that confidence that I needed, you know, on the street. And yeah, so now I keep going. Well, because obviously my job, I see the benefits of it, but it's an outlet for me. I still like things that push me, but that, you know, don't consume my whole life, like bodybuilding. You know, I had to work out 4 hours a day. With jiu-jitsu, it's just 1 hour a day. I can just go and push myself to the max for 1 hour. And when I leave, I have nothing left, you know, in the tank emotionally or physically. So it's a really great outlet for me.
Awesome. Hey, Jay.
Let me ask, so as women who are teaching jiu-jitsu to police officers, and we all know male officers can have a little bit of an ego. I don't know if you guys have noticed that.
No,
Not at all, right? How receptive are officers to when y'all teaching jiu-jitsu techniques and defensive tactics in general? Yeah, you get any pushback? You get challenged or anything like that?
So I'm lucky because my unit is super supportive. The sergeants I work with, my lieutenant, they build me up to the audience. You know, they believe in my skill. They know my background. I've proven myself to them. So they are always talking me up in skill levels. So when I step on, and then obviously I'm competent in what I'm teaching, I feel that it's taken a little time, especially being non-commissioned, but now they're receptive. Now I have a thin blue line open mat that I open up to all DPS commissioned personnel. Last time we had about 40 people there, and it's growing.
Yeah, I've been to that thin blue line open mat once. I haven't made it back since. I really want to come to the next one if possible.
Well, we'll hold your space, man.
Of course. It's awesome. It is neat to see everybody there. It's great. It's great to connect with everybody too, like all the different officers and just other people that train that are involved in law enforcement.
Exactly. And now we're having a lot more newcomers. So they don't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They might not have gotten any defensive tactics training since they left the academy. And DPS's program has changed so much over the last 5 years, 10 years that if you're a senior officer, the last time you came through, it was just rock'em sock'em boxing.
Wow. Ashley?
Yeah, so I just came to the training department this year, so I've only been there 4 months. And I think one of the things that has been more receptive is in the past, people who have taught it didn't train they didn't compete rather. So me going in and all the officers know that I compete in IBJJF tournaments, I think that gives myself more credit than someone who just went to a defensive tactics school and is now trying to teach other officers. Also, explain to the officers how we're going to end up in this situation. So if you just demonstrate a move, officers are going to be like, when would I ever need that? Well, so taking a little bit different perspective, showing them, hey, this is how you're going to end up in this position. So once you're in this position, this is what you do. So then it kind of breaks it down and breaks their barriers down about, oh, well, I'd never be in that position. Well, you probably will be, and this is why.
So Ashley, that brings up a really good point. And we all see this in law enforcement where in the past it's been, hey, I know you don't have a background in martial arts, whatever. We're going to send you to this course. Can you please do this 25-hour course? And now you're going to train all the officers in our department, right? That was the typical way. And it still happens to this day. And we're all nodding because we know, right? So this is one of the advantages of having people who actually do jujitsu. They're on the mat on a weekly basis. They're going to class. It's not just taking a course. They're grinding through it. That really plays a role on how you transmit practical information to police officers. And both of you do jujitsu, so you know. So when people are asking you questions, it's like, hey, Ashley, how does this work when someone's mounted? And you can actually have answers to that. So what are your thoughts on those kind of 40-hour courses, here's your certificate type of thing?
I mean, I think that overall they're great because they get your foot in the door, but until you can learn a technique, but until you understand when to use that technique or what position to use that technique or even how to transition into a position, then it's basically you're not setting yourself up to use the technique, right? Because you don't know how to get there. You don't know exactly what positions will make the technique most effective. So I think they're a great foot in the door, but I think that in order to teach officers, you need to be training. You need to be doing something more than just going to 40-hour courses because it's totally different, right? It's totally different when you go to a 40-hour course. Everybody's kind of just doing the moves. They're not really, it's not competitive. It's not super aggressive because we don't want anyone to get hurt, right? But when you go to compete or you're in a jiu-jitsu school, it's a lot more fast-paced. People are a lot more aggressive. You get to actually try techniques on someone who's resisting, things like that. So you get a different perspective, and it makes all the difference compared to just taking a 40-hour course and not really understanding the benefits of the technique in certain positions.
How about you, Janee?
So I agree with Ashley on that. The foot in the door part is perfect. But I think really what she was touching on too is you need people who are passionate and believe in what they're teaching. You know, if someone just told me to go to this class, okay, now go teach whatever that topic might be. If I'm not really into it and I'm not seeing it, then I know my teaching is affected. So by getting to teach defensive tactics where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu works, you know, it's proven that it works. You know, punching, kicking, all that too, but also touching on that, having that background information to tell them why, like, why are we in this position? How are we going to get out of it? What are the possibilities? Really, really helps. That outside information really helps in addressing some of the questions and well, you know, I'm just going to tase them mentality rather than, you know, going to, you know, I know that one, but that's what I get a lot.
Yeah.
That right there, that I'm just going to tase him mentality. How many times do you hear that? Well, I don't need to go hands on. I'll just tase him. I'll just shoot him.
Yeah.
All the time, especially now that we're pushing out the curriculum to the field and getting to the incumbent officer population. We did a bunch of classes in September. I think we did about 5 or 6 of them. And every single one, we had at least one officer who, while we were demonstrating a takedown, was like, well, I'm not going to dance with him. I'm just going to tase him.
Yeah.
Jesse, what happens when the taser fails? It will fail.
Oh, it will fail. But we actually go more into, well, our use of force model, you know, like, well, that's not really calling for this. You know, you don't have the distance, you don't have all these other factors, you know.
There's a good video that just got posted, and I've seen a couple guys post it. It looks like it's in like a New York subway.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a good example where a guy jumps the turnstiles and attacks the officer while the officer, I think he's trying to get his taser, as a matter of fact. He's trying to pull out a tool, and he
right.
doesn't have time to pull it out. The guy's on top of him before he can get his tool out. His tool goes flying onto the ground. And that's just a good example of, well, guess what? Sometimes you're not going to have time to grab those tools. And if they even work, you know. So there's always good examples of that.
Yeah.
So
I think actually implement that video into one of our classes, because it's
That's
just
a good
like,
one.
Yeah.
just show, be like, look guys, here it is.
That's a good one. That's a good example of a bigger, more athletic, stronger guy than you. Because I think at one point the guy just stops fighting. They still can't get him on the ground. He's taking his PR-24 and he's just hammering him in the legs, clearly very ineffectively, because the guy's just standing there taking it. And it's also probably an instance of lack of training. But yeah, that's a great video for training for sure.
One of the things I'm curious about is, do you either of you use video in your training when you're teaching officers and you're showing, hey, this is what happens and stuff?
We have some videos, but we're working more towards it. You know, it's still a work in progress. The training curriculum is constantly evolving, especially since with my involvement over the last year, being heavily involved in creating curriculum as opposed to just teaching what's already on the books. And then my co-sergeant is actually Gracie Survival Tactics Level 2, and he's brought back really, really good information as well. But
Janee, do you guys show videos of like what Jason was talking about, those fights that happen on YouTube and stuff like that? Are you using that at all, or? We're
implementing them, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We don't have a ton already there, but we're getting to that point.
Okay. How about you, Ash?
Yeah, so I like to get videos of our own officers in situations. One that I really like is the trapped hands, you know, when someone's on their hands and people are just banging on their back, giving them knees, and it's obviously not working. And when you see your friends on video doing that, I think it hits home rather than seeing some stranger in a department you've never heard of on YouTube. It doesn't hit the same with you, you know? So I try to use videos that are actually in our department to show, hey, look at what this person did. Let's see how they could have done it better, kind of thing.
What do y'all do for that? What do you teach on say that people are on their stomach and they're holding their hands kind of in a position to prevent you from getting them into handcuffing? What do y'all do?
Yeah, so we use the Gracie Combatives, Gracie Survival Tactics on trapped hands. So if they're like this, basically you lift up with you lift up on their shoulder, you put your knee in between their elbow and their rib right here, and you lift up simultaneously to create space. Then you squeeze your other hand in that little crack and go here. You switch your legs. I know it's really hard to explain that, do it. Well, you switch your hips, basically you switch your base, and you just use that leverage and it brings their arm out. I mean, it's impossible to keep their arms in whenever you're switching.
I'll tell you, the hinterlock, I think is what they like to call it, because Hinter teaches it, or kind of, I don't want to say he developed it, but he started pushing it with GST. And I do like it, but I've had examples. I've tested it out with guys. If guys are strong enough, they'll resist it. They will not. Their hand won't come out. You know who's got a good, and I'll tell you, I'll try to get Jay. We need to get Jay. I think Jay has some videos of doing it. Jay Wadsworth, our buddy. He kind of did a little, his own version of that actually is a little more effective. And I can't describe it, but we need to get Jay to post a video. We'll share it on our social media. But he does a great little bit of change on that hinterlock that I think he puts a little more pressure on the neck or something that causes them to release that arm. But I have had doing it the way Hinter teaches it. I've had some issues with some guys who are strong enough that they'll drag their body before you get that arm out. And
yeah.
It's a little weird, but that's like all techniques, right? Like not every technique works every time on every person. You have to learn to, adapt and overcome when certain techniques aren't working.
And I think that's the important thing about jiu-jitsu, as we all know, is the adaptability of it. We know techniques fail, and that's why we don't have just one move, right? We multiple, and we have our toolbox. So the ability, especially jiu-jitsu people, to adjust between stuff is pretty phenomenal. When you take those courses and it's like, if they do A, you do B, but what happens if they do C and then you don't have an answer for it, then it all goes to hell in a handbasket. So,
GST is a good course. Now I've taken GST level 1. I haven't done level 2, and it was good. I think the best aspect, and I was talking with some other guys that have gone through GST 1 and 2, the best aspect of GST is honestly, it's their teaching method. Their teaching method is so effective in the way they break down techniques and then show them to officers. That I felt like I got more out of that than anything else. I remember them showing us how to do triangle chokes, And I was like, triangle chokes are hard. It takes a little while to get good at it unless you're just physically built, gifted. Maybe Ashley, because Ashley's kind of built that way. Unless you're just built to hit triangle chokes, it takes a little while to get good at them. Because I remember them teaching us that like day 3, I think it was. And I was like, none of these officers are ever going to hit a triangle choke on anybody. Like half of these guys don't ever train. But it is a good course. I think it's good. It's high points, but I also think it has a lot of room for improvement. I would like to see a course truly just developed by officers and there are some guys that have done it. I think our buddy over in Reno has done it. But they've developed some courses specifically by officers for officers to use in the field. And I'd like to see a little more of that. But thank God we've got people like Hitter and those guys pushing material for officers. I think they really helped out a lot.
Yeah, what I'd like to see more of personally is edge weapon defense. I mean, there's some out there, but just not enough, you know?
Man, let me tell you, Chad Lyman. So I trained with Chad in Vegas. And if you guys know Chad Lyman, who's just a wealth of knowledge. That guy knows so much stuff of all aspects of law enforcement, use of force. And I was training with him, and we were training at where he teaches, one of the places he teaches, and he was teaching edge weapons defense with jiu-jitsu. And we did some different stuff. And so he goes, okay, well, you guys are grappling. I'm just going to drop he had a dummy knife. I'm going to drop a dummy knife, and whoever gets it, and you guys got to fight for it. Let me tell you how much that changes your jiu-jitsu completely when there's a edged weapon that you guys are fighting for, and how difficult it is to maintain control of somebody when they have a knife and they're trying to stab you with it. Well, let me rephrase that. Are stabbing you. Stabbed. I agree with you, actually. Edge weapons defense I think it's something we don't teach enough of for sure.
Yeah. So another thing I want to kind of talk about, and this is kind of getting into one of the reasons that we have both of you on today, was talking about being a female in jiu-jitsu. And I actually just did a little interview with 4 of my female students. And I want to get your perspective, because female perspective is completely different than the male perspective in jiu-jitsu, especially with law enforcement and that type of thing. And I had a candid conversation with my students about it, and I want to have a candid conversation with you. It's not to point fingers, but I want you to kind of illustrate some of the challenges that you have gone through over the years being a female in jiu-jitsu, and how you've overcome those.
Okay. So I started back before jiu-jitsu started exploding, so to speak, right? These days it's way, way more popular. Nobody thinks it's a restaurant, because that's actually what happened in Brooklyn. When they opened up Brooklyn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, people were like, oh, this must be some sort of fusion restaurant. And I'm like, I don't think that's right, because there's no tables. But, I only had heard of it because I had watched UFC and WEC for a little while. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew that wasn't it. When I started, there really weren't too many women in the classes or even on staff. The 2 professors who ran that school were very inclusive, and they had myself and I want to say 4 other women on staff at the various locations of the school that we opened. I think that is a big factor. When you see a female working in the gym, teaching classes on the same level as the males, I think that women are more likely to come in and try it. They might just try that class and stick with that schedule for a little bit until they become more comfortable. That, for me, it was never really a factor that there were no other females there. It's something I wanted to do, so I wasn't going to let something like that stop me. But I have seen that now that jiu-jitsu is popular, that if there are females on the mat or females instructing, that those classes are the ones that are going to have more attendance.
How about you, Ash?
Yeah, obviously I haven't been training near as long as all 3 of you, but the excuse I think that I hear the most from women is that they don't want to train with men, which is ironic, because if they're using it for a self-defense situation, they're more likely to be attacked by a man. So I think that women might be turned off by the fact that if there's not a lot of women in the school or teaching the class. Also being an officer, I'm used to being one of the very few women, so that doesn't really bother me. I think one of the things as a woman that is most challenging for me is that when you are sparring with a man, some of them and their egos don't want you to win, even if you're better. So they turn up the strength, and that's kind of where you have to be careful about not getting hurt. And so that's one of the things that I think bothers me the most is guys not accepting the fact that they're being beaten by a woman, and then they end up hurting them. They end up hurting the woman. So I think that's my biggest challenge.
So have you heard the term, and I chatted about this recently, is when you're turning up the heat to kind of balance where it is, they look at you and go, "Oh, now she's mad." Have you ever had that happen?
Yes, and apparently I get a look in my face when I'm mad. And so I train, obviously, especially during the quarantine. My boyfriend is a black belt, and so we have a mat in our gym. And he says he sees this look in my face when I get mad, and he's like, "Oh my God, calm down." But yeah, people do say that, and it's like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't know. It's you know, I'm able to laugh at stuff like that. Things like that don't offend me, but I can see how it would turn someone off that's genuinely there to learn and wants to learn and is like, dude, what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
And you either have what Ashley's talking about, that I'm not going to let her win attitude, or she's a girl, I'm not going to train attitude. Like I'm a brown belt. I've been doing this for freaking long time. I can tell when somebody's not moving or not doing anything or trying to be a dead fish. And to me, that's more disrespectful than when they do their strength, because I'll up the strength, I'll up this technique and everything like that. And yeah, then you get the, "Oh, now you're mad" thing. And, you know, I laugh at it because it's really not, you know, I'm just raising the bar. You want to play at this game? Okay, I'll raise it up here and I'll get my submissions. But I think that's also the competitor in me too. You know?
And since you are a competitor, what's that like? Because some of the officers that you're training they don't want to compete, and it's not about competition. It's about winning, right? And so this is the weird thing about jiu-jitsu. They're like, well, I would just do this. It's not about points. It's not about, I would never do a berimbolo. And, you know, I think that they have this misunderstanding of what jiu-jitsu is, or they think that, hey, just because you do competition doesn't mean that you don't know how to kick someone's ass. Right. So
the teaching point and the training points that I try and make on that are, I'm probably not going to heel hook somebody. You're probably not going to go for the heel hook, you know, on the side of the road in Texas. But the techniques that we are showing you, we're training them, yes, in a safe, effective manner. So you feel it, but nobody's getting hurt. But when you're utilizing this, I want you to fucking go bonkers, you know, or whatever you wanted to say about that. Like, you need to do this full force, full effort. And when I kind of put it in that terms, like, hey, yes, we're training gently here. It is the gentle art. But this is going to save your life. This is going to get you home at the end of the night if you have to use it. Really clears up some of that for them.
Yeah, obviously we don't teach anything that's too far above people's heads. So I think the main thing about trying to show someone who doesn't have experience or doesn't want to compete or anything like that is, if you learn these techniques, you understand how leverage works. And that's pretty much what you need, leverage to control somebody. And so I think showing them just the basic techniques mean a lot more to them than fancy moves or whatever that you might do in competition.
Yeah. And explain that we're not expecting them to do those fancy moves either. You know, just because Gary Tonin, you know, cartwheel across the mat to guillotine someone, I'm not really expecting you to do that, you know? And I love Gary, so that's not a dig at him, by the way. If I could do that, I would.
Awesome. Jay, you got something over there?
Yeah. So I think this is a good question, and it's one that I think it's changing a little bit. I think you're starting to see more women start to train. But what are some things you think academies can do or we can do to attract more women into jiu-jitsu?
So when I was teaching jiu-jitsu and trying to build up the female population in the gym, one of the things that I saw was very effective was a self-defense night. So you take out the scary word of jiu-jitsu you put it with self-defense. And, you know, every woman's been in that situation where the hair on the back of your neck standing up because the guy across the bar or the restaurant's giving you that look, or, you know, whatever it might be. And then you do jujitsu, you do very basic stuff. You teach them how to fall, you teach them how to get out of mount and slowly bring it up. And then I find that those women, if it's a regular class, start to trickle in because, you know, they show up a little bit earlier and now they're watching the intergender class, whatever level that is. And then soon they're in the basic class, or they want to try no-gi or whatever it might be. So either having a class like that on the schedule that's female led, or doing a regular seminar like that, I've had a lot of success with that in the past. And I think that's a successful tool still.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So one of our coaches is female, and she teaches an early morning class, and it gets a lot of women in the class. We also started recently doing a Sunday women's only, which has been a great turnout. I mean, women from other gyms that don't even train at ours, they come and they bring their friends, and even teenage girls, they're bringing their friends in. So just allowing more class time or training time for women only, I think brings a lot more women in that probably wouldn't have come in on their own, because it's intimidating, right? It's intimidating to do jiu-jitsu anyway, but if you're walking into a school and you only see one other woman, you're gonna be like, you know? So opening it up to where it's just a huge class of women. And I was talking to one of my friends recently, and I know that in Houston, a couple of women's only schools are opening. I mean, that's a big deal. Wow. Just where the entire school is women and ran by women. I mean, that's a really big deal. So hopefully that opens the door for a lot more women practitioners.
But Ashley, that's one of the things. It depends on what city you're in. Obviously, larger cities can have schools like that, and it's one of the problems. Is like, how do you get women into a school when there's only very few women in a school, right? So that's the challenge.
Yeah, it's hard, but I mean, word of mouth, obviously. I mean, and I think that it's important for jiu-jitsu schools to promote to women. If all of your photos and all your videos are just men training and that's what you put on Instagram and Facebook, then that's all you're likely to get. Mm-hmm. You have to show women that online that there's other women there to bring them in, you know? So even if you have one or two, man, you highlight the shit out of those women, blast them all over your social
Awesome.
media, just to show that there's other women there.
Yeah.
And I think once they get into it, from a competitor standpoint, women's bodies move differently. I know you guys know that because you train with females as well. But if I'm trying to get it ready for a competition, and I know I'm going up against a woman, which is generally the consensus in jiu-jitsu, you know, and I'm training with a 230-pound guy instead of a 155, 165-pound female, or any female, you know, it's a different, you're not getting that prep. And so I think by having those women's classes, those women only times, on making space for them, I think that's a good way to sum it up. Make space for the woman in the community.
One of my female competitors, she recently said about rolling with other females, especially in competition. She said that men have a way of looking at it. Basically, what's the best way to explain this? That when she's rolling with females in competition, it is actually way harder to roll with them in competition than it is to roll with the 215, 220 pound guy, because the weight is closer. So the technique and skill has to be really on point. And she said she's had tougher matches with women that she's had with men. And I agree with that. I watch it, and it's crazy how intense it is.
Yeah. I used to have this quote that men are natural warriors, but a woman in battle is truly bloodthirsty. And
I love it.
I tried to use it as the
Viking-esque.
But I think that's true. And I think you see it in jiu-jitsu competition, in MMA. You know, the knockdown, drag out fights in MMA, they're the females cards. You know, they're your 125-pound, you know, fighters or whatever it might be. But I think there's just this natural bloodthirst level that we get. And I would agree with your student 100%. And so that's why it's so important in your training camps or in your regular day-to-day classes to have females work with females, but also work with males.
Yeah.
Are you guys, so, I mean, we all know we're in the middle of this COVID, Corona craziness. What do you guys do? Are you guys doing anything? Like, I know, Ashley, you have Ricardo, you guys can train together. but some of us don't have someone to train with. What are you guys doing to stay sharp? Yeah, it's okay. What are you guys doing to stay sharp, or are you doing anything to stay sharp for when the mats open back up?
So I'm doing just individualized exercises. You know, we were talking a little bit before we went live, you know, about the Zoom jiu-jitsu classes. I haven't been doing them, but I have been, you know, working on my movement, get a grappling dummy, kind of do some transition stuff, bridges, technical lifts, just stuff to keep my joints working. I also do a lot of yoga to try and keep my flexibility up, because part of my game is flexibility. Part of jiu-jitsu is flexibility too. But that's about it.
Yeah, I've really upped my weightlifting. I'm trying to gain a little bit more muscle. So I'm still doing yoga, which I did before. I'm still doing that because I lack the flexibility. I'm super terrible at that. So I knew that if I completely stopped, that I would just be back in square one. So I've just been still doing that. And then obviously my boyfriend and I, we train probably 3 to 4 times a week. I'm helping him with his Zoom classes, which is usually just certain techniques. So it's kind of cool. I kind of get like a one-on-one lesson, private lesson. And then obviously it always ends up in sparring, because you can't get a private lesson without sparring, but
Right. That's cool. No, I'm not a big, we were talking about this too. I'm not a big fan of the Zoom classes. For me, I need that physical hands-on in-class learning. So I have to be honest, I haven't really participated in the Zoom classes. I've just kind of been like, this is a break for my body, and I'll pick it back up when we start going again. How about you guys? Janee, have you done any Zoom classes? Have you tried any of them, or?
No. It's one of those things I wanted to, but right now I live in an apartment building, so I don't think my neighbors downstairs would be really happy with that.
They don't want to hear your brake falls?
But, you know, I don't think so. Going out on a limb.
if I wasn't helping with the Zoom class, I wouldn't be watching. Let's put it that way.
It's kind of like YouTube.
I would get nothing out of it. We actually have a lady that watches every day, and she's over here every day with her wine glass. I'm like, that would be me. I would be watching with my wine glass.
Hilarious.
Yes.
She's like rubbing it in y'all's face. This is fantastic.
Be like, this is a triangle. I love it. You know?
That's great.
So here's the question then, maybe not doing Zoom classes, but I've seen a lot of people during this whole crisis that they're downloading videos, they're watching videos. Is that the same? Are you not watching videos because it's similar to a Zoom class, or like, are you watching videos at all, or have you?
No, I'm watching videos, but I watched videos before. You know, okay. I like Tom DeBlas a lot, and he put all his instructionals up for free. Yeah. When this thing first happened. So I went and kind of got a couple of those, but I mean, that's stuff that I do in my normal training anyway. I take that as like study time.
Okay.
So. Yeah. I was never big on watching videos before. I'm hands-on. So the videos just are overwhelming to me. The only thing I still watch, which I enjoy, is like you were saying, Chad. He does a lot of like little technique, just snippets on Instagram, and I love watching just little things that I see something, I'm like, oh cool, okay. But watching a whole instructional, that just goes way over my head, and it's probably the blue belt level. You know, it's just too much in where I can't do it hands on. Like, I'm not gonna learn just watching a video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jason and I talk about that as your rank changes, how you digest videos change.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think we were talking about before. It's like you after a certain level, you can watch a technique, and because you kind of have a catalog of techniques already built up. Usually, it's related to one of them, or it's just a different version of a technique, and you can kind of learn it and then apply it through memory. But yeah, it takes. That's only a recent happening for me the last couple of years, maybe. But before, yeah, I was like Ashley. I was like you. I was like, I gotta do this to learn it. I can't just watch it. Yeah. You know, I'm very hands-on myself.
I think you made a great point where you just kind of add it to the catalogs. You look at the little details that whoever is teaching adds in, and you're like, oh, okay. So if I strip the angle here, you know, it might be a little bit more effective. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would still say no. This is not the YouTube or instructional level, you know, grading. I'm not going to take a test to get my black belt after just watching a full instructor.
Unless you do Gracie University, then maybe.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
I tell you though, I trained with a guy who got his blue belt through Gracie University when I was in when I went to school there at Torrance. He was really good. Now he wasn't going to submit me, but his techniques were on point. And he said he got his blue belt through his garage and his buddies watching the Gracie University classes. So say what you want about it, but my one experience with somebody who got his blue belt that way, the guy was solid. I'm not gonna take away from it. It could be an anomaly. I don't know.
I'm not going to knock anybody trying to better themselves, but it's different when you're going against someone who's actively trying to fight you and fight against that technique than just getting good at the technique. But
yeah, no, I agree with you too. I agree with you there for sure.
So here's something I want both of you to do. If you were to make a commercial and the commercial was to get women involved in jiu-jitsu, it doesn't have to be police officers in particular. What would be your selling point if you were talking to them? It's like, this is why you actually need to do it. Because I know that women hear about doing jiu-jitsu. You've probably talked to a lot of women that you know, and they just kind of go like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. What is the point that you can really drive home? Or do you have any examples? Has jiu-jitsu ever helped you? Has it ever saved you actually on the job or in real life type of thing?
I think,
oh, go ahead.
So I think the selling point for everybody, but for women especially, is when was the last time you did something for you? Like, that society's not telling you to do it. It's not to impress anybody. It's just for you. Because all the benefits, that's all they are, right? The skill level, the fitness level, the health, the getting to network, getting new friends in society. Because I remember sitting in a car once and I had just gone through, this was a couple of years ago, so I had just gone through a bad breakup, and I was sitting there with my friend who also trains jiu-jitsu, and I was like, you know what, like, F this, like, I'm not gonna skip class or not go to jiu-jitsu because I'm sad, because of a boy, you know, I'm gonna do this for me. I've always done jiu-jitsu for me. And it got me back on track after a dark period of a couple weeks where I wasn't going to class and I was just feeling sorry for myself. And maybe that's just being in it, you know, that's where that perspective comes from. But I would highlight things. I mean, the fitness, right? You want that beach body, you want the quarantine body, you know.
Body.
You know, it's going to get you in shape. You're going to feel great about yourself, and you're going to be able to defend yourself if put in that position.
Yeah, I would probably, I guess, on a different note, look at the confidence of jiu-jitsu, especially just on the job. I know we're kind of gearing toward just women in general instead of women police officers, but like, why rely on someone else for your protection? You know, and if a lot of people are against carrying weapons or whatnot, so why not have some other type of self-defense that gives you the confidence to protect yourself? You know, you can't rely on somebody else for that. So.
Yeah, I always used to say that you don't have to reload jiu-jitsu. It's always there. So, which is nice.
I might have to steal that line.
Yeah.
I did too. I'm going to steal your line, Janee. That was a good one.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, I'm going to highlight that when I do the little clip. When I throw
Me
this on
too.
That's a good one.
That's a great line.
So I want to give you both of an opportunity to do any shout outs to people who've influenced you, your home gyms, anything like that. So Ashley, why don't we start with you? The floor is yours.
So I'll give a shout out to Stephanie for getting me into jiu-jitsu. She saw it long-term for me because of my career, but yeah, that's when I was doing bodybuilding. Who would have thought I would have ever switched to jiu-jitsu, right? But and then, you know, obviously my boyfriend runs Gracie Bahia Lakeway, so major shout out to him. He is all for officers training, gives free months of training, discounted months, things like that. So really any school that is welcoming to officers and gives any type of discount, because you always hear it, you know, it's too expensive, whatever, and just having a gym that has other officers in it means a lot. You know, if you're the only officer, it's kind of like, you know, do they even like officers here? So really any gym that gives discounts or promotes officer safety or anything like that. And then also, of course, Brian Marvin, and he was my first professor, and man, he really broke down a lot of techniques where at the end he would say, this is how you'd switch to handcuffing position. You know, this is how you would switch to this, and just really making it hit home for an officer. That's pretty cool to me.
Awesome.
So I would have to say Professor Brian Glick and Shihan Jean Dunn, they were my first teachers. They're the ones who instilled the love of jiu-jitsu at the very basic level for me, coming off the streets and not really knowing what it is other than recognizing a guillotine because you're at favoritism. Any gym that opens up to police officers, like, thank you guys. That's so useful with what we're trying to teach in defensive tactics. And then on a personal note, Captain Greg Davis, because he was the one who actually finally listened to me about my experience level in ground fighting and got me certified as an arrest and control tactics instructor, and really much led to where I am now in my career.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you spending the hour with us to chat about jiu-jitsu and women in jiu-jitsu and policing. So thanks very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yes,
Okay.
we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, be safe out there, and we'll hopefully see you on the mats. I can't wait to come back to Texas. I want to come back there.
Yes.
Such an
Come
amazing
back.
state. I will.